All right, man. So we got some absolutely massive news here for Kamala Harris in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, we've been keeping you updated about what's going on. A big thing in 2020 that actually happened was the third party support was almost non existent or very muted. And that was a big thing that also was able to let Biden win in 2020 as opposed to 2016, where there was a lot of third party support because Hillary was obviously, not a really great candidate. So a lot of people ended up voting third party. 2020 was a different scenario because it was so dire with COVID and everything. And so he was able to win. So what we have here is this article says, Cornel West can't be on Pennsylvania's presidential ballot, court decides. So Cornel West is, of course, he's like a left-wing dude who's running. He was definitely going to be pulling some votes from Kamala Harris and definitely more from Kamala Harris than Trump. So it says, Cornel West can't be on Pennsylvania's presidential ballot, court decides. It says, independent presidential candidate Cornel West lost a legal challenge Friday in his bid to get on the ballot in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. Commonwealth Court Judge Renee Cohn, Jubelirer, in a 15-page opinion, sided with the Secretary of State's office under Democratic Governor Shapiro in rejecting West's candidacy paperwork. The Secretary of State's office said West's campaign lacked the required affidavits for 14 of West's 19 presidential electors. So what I think is kind of going on too, I don't know if that's the case here, but what it looks like is I guess a lot of the states require, maybe in addition to signatures, also these electors who are promising to vote for you. But what ended up happening in the state of Arizona, there was a lot of controversy because Cornel West's attempt to get on the ballot was actually being aided by Republican lawyers who were trying to make sure he could get on. And so what the interviews of a couple of the electors said was, they were like, hey, when it was just Biden, I was down with Cornel, but ever since Kamala was chosen, it just completely flipped. Again, I personally have no idea why. They're basically the same person. But what ended up happening was, politically at least, right, policies-wise, but what ended up happening was they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm good now, I'm done. So a bunch of them actually looks like reneged. I don't know if that's what happened in this case or not, but that's what happened in the state of Arizona. And one of the electors' affidavit was just completely forged. I think it's kind of a bad look for Cornel West. It looks really sus and super shady, and it looks really, really just sus and kind of weird. It says Jubelirer, a Republican, agreed with Secretary of State's office that minor party presidential electors are to be considered candidates for office who must file affidavits, even if major party presidential electors are not. The court case among a raft of presidential legal maneuvering around third-party candidates, as backer of Republican nominee Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Kamala Harris aim to derail third-party candidates who might siphon away support or to help others who might hurt their opponent. This is also big, too, because of RFK dropping out. He's technically not dropped out. He suspended his campaign in swing states. He's going to stay on the ballot in blue and red states. So that's going to give her a boost. So Cornel not being on these ballots is absolutely huge. These margins are going to be really small. Like in the state of Michigan, for example, the margin was 0.23%. So we can actually take a look here over at the polls right now in Pennsylvania. So in the polls in Pennsylvania right now, Harris is up by 1.8, which is solid. But I do believe if she wishes to win the state of Pennsylvania, she's going to have to perform better than this. Biden was actually up by about 4.5. He ended up winning only by about 1.2. So you have to be aware of that error. And so I think she really needs to get this number up if she wants to win. I think she will. I think the DNC boost will probably kick in, and there'll be some of those kinds of boosts still out there. But what we can see if we go down these polls, a lot of these polls don't actually contain him, but like this Signal poll has him at 2%, which is really significant. Like 2% is absolutely massive. So I know that a lot of you guys are going to say, oh, well, this is not a big deal. Most of Cornel's voters are going to go elsewhere anyways. But the thing is for Cornel West, it doesn't matter necessarily like where the votes go in terms of like, oh, okay, maybe you're thinking, well, hey, even if like 0.7 of his 1% or his 100% of voters like goes towards, Jill Stein or nobody else, the thing is it's all about margin. So for example, even if he's a 1%er, let's say Kamala Harris can win that by a 0.3 margin against Trump. Let's say, for example, 0.5 goes to Stein, 0.1 stays home, and then, she gets 0.3, he gets 0.1. That's a 0.2 margin. That's huge. That's a net margin of 0.2. That's huge. So any 1 or 2% is massive, even if you don't get anywhere close to most of it. Even if out of 2% you get 0.4, but Trump only gets 0.1, that's huge because that's a 0.2 margin. And likely you'd probably get an even larger than that. So this 2% is huge. This one has a 0. So some of these polls have them. This is another one that has West at 2% of the Bullfinch group. These ones have some pretty crazy polls going on right now for Kamala Harris. And so they have West here at 2. Some of the other ones have zeros. This one has 1. So he's definitely polling at some numbers in some of these polls for sure. And a lot of them he's not included. And then in others he's getting 0, like in this one and some of the other ones. But 0 might also be rounded down. So it might be like, I don't know, less, maybe 0.4 or something or whatever. Trust me, this is a really, really big deal for the race. Because again, even like the smallest of a margin, if you have 2%, 1.5 votes Stein, and then you get 0.4 and Trump gets 0.1, that's a 0.3 margin. That's huge. Absolutely massive. And so this is really interesting here. And so what we can see in this state, also in the state of Pennsylvania, what's going to come really close is, so there's this article, it talks about how Pennsylvania is slipping from Donald Trump's grasp. And it says Kamala Harris gains ground with crucial Hispanic voters in swing state that could decide 2024 election. So it's another really, really huge thing for Kamala Harris. So what's happened is there's been a really large surge of Hispanic population in the state of Pennsylvania. So there's numbering roughly 600,000 adults in a state that was settled by margins of less than 100,000 votes in the past 2 elections. Pennsylvania's Hispanics are where the votes are. We seem to be committing an unforced error, said Albert Eisenberg, almost as Einstein, a Philadelphia-based Republican consultant. Hispanics could be the deciding factor. It says that they've been running Spanish language elections. I've never seen a campaign start as early as Biden. Usually it would be in September, said Victor Martinez, owner of Pennsylvania's largest Spanish language radio network and the anchor of his own morning show from Allentown. So his support amongst Hispanics is pretty low, actually. This is what confuses me is why the Trump campaign is not even trying to reach Spanish speakers. As a businessman, I would go broke if I ignored my fastest growing audience. Harris has also done a phone-in interview with Martinez in English. So there's a huge surge going on, and also these people I think are young. They're young skewing. So the proportion of Hispanic voters who are actually going there are actually disproportionately young, which are obviously going to be disproportionately Democrats. So it's absolutely huge. This can also turn the election for Kamala Harris. So this is an absolutely massive thing for her, which is her ability to get these as well in the state. And so she needs to continue. She's surging right now as it pertains to Hispanic voters, and so hopefully she'll be able to keep it up. I do have actually a hot take that I'm kind of toying with as well. And that's that I think that Pennsylvania is actually more likely to go blue than Wisconsin. And so the reason why I actually say that is because for the poll numbers, Pennsylvania here you can see was won by about 1.2. If we go through and we check the polls back in 2020 for Pennsylvania, Joe Biden's up 4.7, right? He's up 4.7. He ends up winning the election in total. He wins by 1.2. So if he wins by 1.2 and the polls are saying about 4.7, the polls were off by about 3.5. Now, the Wisconsin results, you can see here he only won by 0.7. This looks really close because 20,000 votes is pretty crazy. If we look at the Wisconsin numbers, though, check this out. So Wisconsin, 8.6% lead for Biden, and he only ended up winning by 0.7. So you can see that it was a absolutely massive, or 7.9 on election day, we'll say 7.9, and she only won by 0.7. So, or it's 8.4 on election day. So he only won by 0.7. So that's like a, you know what I mean, like a 7.3, percent polling error, so almost twice. Just for reference, his lead was double in Wisconsin versus what it was in Pennsylvania, but the amount he won by was basically double in the reverse order. So he won by half the amount, in Pennsylvania as he did in Wisconsin, or vice versa, right? So you might think, oh, well, maybe 2020 was an outlier, but if you look at these Wisconsin polls here, I averaged this out, it's like 3.4 for, or not 3.4. This one is, I think, like 5.4, something around there. And then the Wisconsin 2016 results, she loses by 1 point. So they're off by like 4.4 or something more than that. And then the Pennsylvania numbers here, when you look at the Pennsylvania averages here, it's much, much better. You can see in terms of, the Pennsylvania numbers here. So it ends up being much closer than Wisconsin was. The Wisconsin numbers are much nicer. You have sixes, a bunch of sixes, sevens, etc. So these look really nice for Wisconsin, right? Pennsylvania, we have here, looks much, much lower. These, I think, average out to like 3.4. And Pennsylvania, she ends up losing by, looks like 1.2. So it's not off by as much. So it happened in 2016 as well. So my hot take personally is Pennsylvania is actually more likely to go blue than Wisconsin is. And I think Cornel West dropping out even further presses that. But it'll be interesting to see if this does end up panning out. But this is a little hot take that I'm toying with here. But it happened in 2020 and 2016, so it's pretty interesting. Cornel West no longer on the ballot, which is huge. Even if it's just like 1 or 2%, like if she can net some kind of tiny margin, it'd be absolutely massive in Pennsylvania. And then also the Hispanic voters, that are surging in the state of Pennsylvania can also give her the election. So a lot of stuff growing in Pennsylvania. Her Hispanic numbers generally going up. And I actually think Pennsylvania is more likely to go blue than Wisconsin, which is actually better because Pennsylvania is 19 electoral votes. Pennsylvania is 19. Wisconsin is just 10. So much better to win Pennsylvania than Wisconsin.